Discover the hidden door one color that transforms women 50+ into an incredible vision of youthfulness. Carol strolled down the familiar streets of her suburban paradise, memories wrapped tightly around her like an old quilt. Each sidewalk crack, each tree lining the block, whispered the stories of her past, her vibrant youth filled with dreams now dimmed by a recent divorce. The color of her life, once lively and bright, had dulled to gray. As she passed by the community center's window, excitement filled the air around a new art project led by her neighbor Lisa, who radiated an energy that seemed almost contagious. Carol's heart raced at the sight of a dazzling teal, a color she once loved, now seemingly a distant star. But doubt coiled tightly in her chest, whispering that she didn't belong in such a vibrant world. Why would they want me? She thought, her breath hitching as anxiety crept in. Shadows of self-doubt ghosted through her mind, fueled by her bustling but traditional family, especially her mother, who loved her but held a fierce belief in societal norms. Carol hesitated, torn between the yearning for expression and the instinct to retreat into her mundane routine. As days turned to weeks, the teal hue became a thread binding her burgeoning self back together. In the privacy of her home, brush in hand after years of neglecting her creatively frozen self, she felt a release as she painted. Enthusiasm pulsed through her veins, brightening each corner of her world. Friends noticed her spark igniting. The laughter and warmth they once shared began to flourish again. However, amidst her blossoming creativity, her sister Ellen, a high-achieving, impeccably polished force, cast her aspirations aside with disdain. "Carol, at your age, you should focus on practicality, not whims," she would often assert, her voice dripping with skepticism. An inner turmoil raged within Carol, skepticism battling the joy of rediscovery. Should she ignore Ellen's warnings and embrace the thrill that poured from her new endeavor, or bend her will to the family's unyielding expectations? Each interaction with her sister left bruises on her heart, revealing raw insecurities she had buried. Then, the universe dropped a bombshell. A local gallery offered her a chance to showcase her teal-infused works. Excitement coursed through her like electricity, but with it came a knot of apprehension. This wasn't just about paint and canvas. It was a declaration of who she was, a fight to reclaim an identity that slipped through her fingers over the years. The pressure mounted as the opening night loomed closer. Should she fortify her sister's rigid views, or risk revealing her truest self under the spotlight? On the eve of the exhibition, faced with a blank canvas and swirling thoughts, the weight of her reality soaked in. Who was she really? Was she brave enough to step out from the shadows? The fear of judgment, the urging need for acceptance, twisted in her gut like a serrated knife. Would she solidify a new path, or retreat and bury her dreams beneath obligation? In her sunlit studio, the door creaked open, revealing the world eager and waiting, yet terrifying at the same time. Friends and family were set to arrive, each carrying expectations stamped into her psyche. The reality of vulnerability gnawed at her. Would her vivid colors shine in a world so adamant about conformity, or would she fade into the backdrop yet again? The gallery awaited. Her heart danced on the precipice of decision, encompassing a truth too exquisite to ignore. The gallery buzzed with life, an electric hum that danced through Carol's veins, igniting a mix of anticipation and dread. Each face she recognized came with its own set of expectations, layered with years of familial norms that threatened to smother her newfound spirit. In this space filled with creative energy, where colors collided and imagination reigned, she felt like a fish out of water, an outsider despite her works adorning the walls. As she stood beside her collection, her heart raced. Each canvas showcased her journey through shades of teal, capturing not just the color, but the essence of her rebirth. Oh, how she wished to bathe in this artful freedom, to let the vibrant strokes of her brush tell the world who she had become. But the shadows of her mother's disapproval and Ellen's skepticism lurked in the background, whispering reminders of practicality over passion. "Just think of what people will say," Ellen's voice echoed, crisp and piercing through the din of excitement. It was easy to wallow in the criticism that rang from her sister's lips. But the moment Carol closed her eyes and envisioned her canvases, a new strength surged within her, pushing against the weight of familial expectations. There, enveloped in teal, she felt her resolve crystallizing. This was more than an exhibition. It was a symbol of her refusal to be merely a wife, a sister, a daughter, defined by the roles that had constrained her. This was Carol, the artist, reclaiming her narrative. Determined to break free from the chains of another's vision for her life, she took a deep breath, the air heavy with the scent of oil paint and varnish infused with hope. The thoughts of her friends coming to support her flickered like candlelight. Warmth and encouragement surrounded her, whispering the promise of acceptance. They would see her for who she had become, not who they had always expected her to be. As guests began to filter in, Carol positioned herself slightly away, allowing others to pass by her artworks with curiosity. She watched, heart pounding, as viewers lingered over the pieces, their reactions both exhilarating and terrifying. Was her art speaking to them? Were they interpreting the unspoken struggles woven into each brushstroke? "Remarkable," someone murmured, their voice laced with genuine admiration. But a faint trace of doubt, spawned by her sister's words, still clung to her heart. What if they were just being polite? When Lisa approached her, excitement bursting from within, she sensed a shift in her own reality. "Carol, your work is incredible. You have captured something transformative." "But what if they don't see it that way?" Carol whispered, her voice trembling with vulnerability. "Then they don't understand," Lisa replied, her brow furrowing as she leaned closer. "But you must understand that you are the one setting the standard, not them. This is your truth." A sliver of confidence crept in, weaving through the doubts. Did it matter if they understood? Could she perhaps redefine the conversation around her art rather than allowing her sister's opinions to script her narrative? As the night unfolded, a pivotal moment arrived. The gallery owner expressed interest in collaborating with Carol for a curated show. This was an opportunity to explore her deepest creative desires. It would require her to step further into the spotlight, away from the safety of her quiet home. With exhilaration blurring the edges of her fears, Carol felt the tide turning. How could she harness this newfound potential without losing herself to the same expectations that bound her before? The challenge now lay before her, to continue pushing the boundaries of her creativity while confronting the lingering critics from her past. The moment of truth had dawned, and as she faced the swirling chaos of her emotions, Carol knew that the true struggle had only just begun. Would she seize the opportunity to amplify her voice, or surrender to the familiar comfort of self-doubt? Under the weight of her decision, she clung tightly to the colors enveloping her, a vivid declaration of who she was becoming. It was a question of courage that no one else could answer but herself. The seductive pull of the canvas whispered louder than ever, promising adventure and revelation. But ahead lay a precipice where resolution beckoned. The gallery glimmered around her, filled with hopeful whispers and muted expectations, but within, the real battle was just igniting. The time had come to face the thick veil of doubt and discover who she truly was in the purifying light of her own creation. The following days were punctuated by a buzzing energy that sent Carol into a whirlwind of thoughts. Each morning, she woke to visions of her canvases and the potential collaborations swirling in her mind, battling with the panting shadow of her doubts. Those initial glimmers of confidence were both exhilarating and terrifying, challenging her to embrace not only her art, but the artist within. As she explored the gallery's proposal, it became increasingly clear that this was more than just a chance for recognition. It was a test of her resolve. Would she shape the narrative, or would it be shaped for her? The prospect of a curated show meant more than just public display. It required a foray into authenticity, stepping into an arena where her inner critic loomed larger than ever. She decided to reach out to fellow artists she admired in the community. They were accomplished, some approaching careers she once deemed unreachable. With every email she penned, however, a part of her hesitated, questioning whether she deserved their attention. Even as she pressed send, the nagging voice of doubt gnawed at her, age-old skepticism rooted deep in familial expectations. These were the very barriers she had attempted to dismantle, yet here she was, almost instinctively retreating to old habits when faced with the new. When responses began to trickle in, Carol was surprised at the warmth and sincerity within the messages. Many welcomed her enthusiasm and shared their experiences of vulnerability amidst uncertainty. Those interactions became a lifeline. Offers for coffee and studio tours bridged the gap between her and the vibrant network she had always observed from a distance. With each meeting, she was greeted not with judgment, but with camaraderie, artists reflecting pieces of fragmentation and self-doubt that echoed her own. In those conversations, she found inspiration not only for her art, but for her evolution as a person. They shared stories of triumph interwoven with struggles, capturing the imbalanced dance between their designs and the world's expectations. Amidst it all, she uncovered the truth. Every artist faced the roar of uncertainty, yet they were still willing to share their vulnerability, risking it for the sake of art. Taking a deep breath, Carol resolved to transform her fear into action. She began sketching, diving deep into what she wanted her curated show to symbolize: the colors, the themes, the emotions. Each canvas would be a testament to her journey, an assertion of her narrative. This time, she would wield her brushes as weapons, painting not just for recognition, but for personal reclamation. As the plans for the exhibition expanded in her mind, she could feel a metamorphosis unfolding within her. The woman who once hesitated to voice her opinions now sought to carve out a space for her unique contributions. But as ambition buoyed her spirit, foreign tension began squirming in her gut. The fear of failure loomed prominently, especially with Ellen's disapproving gaze embedded in her consciousness. That evening, with sketches strewn across her dining table, she heard the vibrational hum of a text message. It was Ellen again, her blunt words slashing through Carol's resolve, tilted toward practicality. "Is this really what you want?" it read, cloaked in skepticism. The question sat in the air, rudely colliding with the new identity Carol was nurturing. A rush of adrenaline fueled her desire to respond, to assert herself boldly. But inspired by the artistic discussions she had shared, Carol hesitated, her fingers hovering over the screen. If she declined the opportunity to confront her sister now, would she forever remain caught in the web of their discontent? Could she redefine not just how she perceived art, but how her family perceived her? The crossroads loomed larger than ever. Gritting her teeth, Carol took a step back, both in her mind and from the uneasy dynamic with her sister. It was clear, creating art was only the beginning. The real journey now demanded a confrontation with her familial identity, a shattering of expectations that extended beyond her canvases. With resolve brewing in her heart, she knew she couldn't back down. It was time to delve deeper into the narrative of her life, challenging not only the perception of her sister, but ultimately the voice echoing in her own head. As the night deepened, Carol found herself on the precipice of her truth, armed with the knowledge of newfound allies in her artistic community. Yet, the pull of fear and family expectations still tethered her. How could she dismantle the walls of her past and build the legacy she longed for? In that moment of reflection, she sensed the urgency of her journey. A dawning realization washed over her. The musty shackles of familial expectations were no match for the fervent pulse of authenticity raging beneath her skin. And as she placed her hand on the canvases, bearing witness to her evolution, she whispered to herself, "This is just the beginning." But out there, in the shadows of doubt, a confrontation awaited, one that demanded a total commitment to her newfound self. Would she rise to the challenge, or linger in the familiar confines of expectation? Carol woke the next day with a burning determination and a clarity of purpose she had never embraced before. She could almost feel the canvases calling to her, urging her to translate her inner turmoil into art. Each stroke of her brush would be a rebellion against the voices that had plagued her for years, particularly the relentless doubt seeded by her family. She spread her sketches across the living room floor, an eclectic mix of colors and forms reflecting the range of her emotions. Blood red, electric blue, and sunny yellows danced across the pages, each promising to express facets of herself she had long neglected. The idea of a curated show no longer sent chills down her spine. Instead, it propelled her forward, pushing her to cement the narrative she wished to share. It was now or never. When she ventured out to gather supplies, the colors of the world around her seemed more vibrant, each shade embodying the potential she felt brewing inside. The gallery, once a distant hope, now felt like a tangible goal, a destination ripe with opportunities. Stepping into the local art store, she was greeted by familiar faces, artists she recognized but never really knew. As she browsed through the aisles, an elderly woman caught her eye. With wispy gray hair and a paint-specked apron, she was deeply engaged in selecting her own supplies. Carol felt a pang of recognition, a kindred spirit wrestling with the same creative spirits. "Are you working on something new?" the woman inquired, her intelligent gaze assessing Carol's demeanor. The question ignited something within Carol, washing away the hesitation she had faced countless times before. "Yes," she replied, surprised by the firmness in her own tone. "I'm preparing for a curated show. It's my chance to define my own narrative." The woman nodded slowly, as if weighing Carol's words. "Art is an act of courage, an assertion of identity," she herself affirmed. "What will you say?" The simplicity and gravity of the question settled over Carol like a warm blanket. Deep inside, she knew that this was the moment to commit fully, to lay her intentions bare and confront her fears instead of hiding behind them. "I want to show that art can heal, that it can reclaim personal truths," she offered, her heart racing. A flicker of excitement ignited in her chest as she recognized the depth of her assertion. "Good," the woman smiled back. "But remember, every stroke is also a challenge to yourself. Embrace that struggle." It was this advice that echoed within her as she gathered her supplies and headed home, ready to transform not only the canvases, but her very self. She spent hours painting, pouring out her emotions onto the fabric like a confessional. Each brushstroke was a mini confrontation, a rebellious reclaiming of her narrative. In the midst of her artistic fervor, she received another message from Ellen. This time, it was less an inquiry and more an ultimatum. "You need to be practical, Carol. Think of where this leads." An electric pulse raced through her. You should have seen it coming, she thought. Despite the warmth of acceptance from her artistic peers, one cold comment from Ellen was capable of erasing all that progress. Taking a moment to breathe, Carol reminded herself of the promise she had made to her evolving identity. This was her fight, her art, and ultimately, her decision. The call to action burned within her. She crafted a response, carefully articulating her aspirations and the necessity of this journey. It was both exhilarating and terrifying. As she hit send, her heart pounded in her chest. Had she crossed a line? Would she finally step into her truth or risk tightening the very chains she wanted to break? Amidst the turmoil, a thought emerged. What if this was not just an artistic, but a personal revolution? What if she could confront Ellen and all the baggage that came with her? Questions swirled in her mind, pulling at the corners of her conviction. With every moment spent deliberating, tension mounted. What would her next steps mean for her relationship with her sister, and, more fundamentally, for herself? With her heart racing and determination surging, she leaned back from her canvases. What awaited her after this bold move would redefine everything. Would she shatter the expectations of her family, dive deeper into her expressive self, and emerge transformed. The canvas demanded her gaze once more, each hue resonating with the question that loomed larger than ever. What would Carol choose to paint as her next chapter? As the evening light spilled into the room, Carol stood before her easel, clutching her brush like a sword. The message to Ellen echoed in her mind, fueling both doubt and determination. She could feel the weight of expectation pressing down on her. Was she truly ready to burn these bridges, to step into the unknown with only her instincts to guide her? Blinking hard, she refocused on the canvas, her heart hammering with the anticipation of the conflict she both dreaded and craved. It was time to confront what lay beneath her decisions, the fears that intertwined her identity and the art she wanted to create. What if confronting her sister was more than just a personal revolution? Could it be the very catalyst needed for her artistic evolution? With each stroke, colors mingled and clashed, embodying her emotional turmoil. She painted with reckless abandon, mixers of fiery reds, crisp blues, and softer pastels, layering solutions over confusion and self-doubt. Each brushstroke felt like a small act of defiance, breaking through the murky waters of convention and intimidation that had swirled around her for far too long. Art became her refuge, a maze of vibrant emotions that welcomed her rather than shunned her. Intrigued by how far her instincts would guide her, she thought about all the moments in which she had silenced her voice. Practically, she had always followed the lines drawn by society, shaped by family expectations. But the internal struggle, the guilty conscience she had developed trying to appease everyone, was becoming unbearably heavy. Carol had barely skimmed the surface of her true self, and for once, she craved depth. As the moon began to rise, she stepped back from her canvas and let the brush drop to the ground. The vibrancy of her emotions now stared back at her, a chaotic but revealing masterpiece that resonated with the complexities of her journey. Yet the question remained, was she ready for the world to see this vulnerable reflection of her spirit? That realization prompted a new wave of anxiety. What if Ellen found out about the show before she stepped into the limelight? What if her sister's disapproval tainted the very essence of her work? Or even worse, what if failures from the past seeped into her present efforts, diluting her confidence? Yet, just as quickly, that anxiety morphed into resolve. Her art would speak louder than words ever could. Maybe this was the moment she needed to fortify herself against doubters, both within and outside her family. Carol wiped her brow and took a deep breath, her heart racing at the thought of what lay before her. Before she could second-guess her thoughts, she pulled out her phone and composed another message to Ellen. But this time, it was different. It was no longer a plea for understanding or acceptance. Rather, it was an affirmation of who she was becoming. I believe in my journey and my art. I know you don't see it yet, but this is essential for my growth and happiness. With a trembling finger, she pressed send. As the boldness of her actions settled in, something shifted inside her. A fire ignited. Now the battlefield was not filled with the fear of judgment, but with liberated colors of identity. She was en route to confront not only her sister, but the reality of her own self-doubt. Carol turned back to her canvas, emboldened. The colors now boldly proclaimed the truths she wished to reveal. Her story would not be muted. But as she contemplated what to paint next, a significant thought flickered to life. What if letting her art flourish required more than vocal affirmation? What if it demanded that she stand firm against a tide that had long sought to undermine her? The answers were veiled, yet an understanding began to dawn on her. This journey would not end with an artistic endeavor. It was merely the beginning. Ringing filled her ears, snapping her out of her resolve. It was Ellen calling. With a mixture of dread and determination, Carol gripped the phone. The moment had come to face the voices that had threatened to smother her dreams. Would this be the conversation that would carve out her new identity? Or would it ensnare her in fear once more? The tension built as she answered the call, prepared for whatever challenge awaited her. This interaction possibly held consequences she hadn't yet considered. What awaited her on the other end of the line was unknown, but she had to brace for it. Would this be the pivotal moment she needed, or merely a setback in her quest for authenticity? Carol's heart raced as she placed the phone to her ear, bracing herself for the impact of Ellen's voice. "Hey," she forced out, aware of the tremor in her own tone. The silence that followed felt heavy, pregnant with the weight of unspoken tension. "Hey, I got your message," Ellen finally replied, her voice a mix of curiosity and caution. Carol's stomach knotted, an instinctive reaction to a conversation she both desired and dreaded. "I know things might be different now," Carol uttered tentatively, each word forming with difficulty, like pushing through a dense fog. "I just want you to understand. I get that you're on a path, but this doesn't just affect you." Ellen's voice sharpened with urgency. "You know Mom and Dad will have questions, right? You're their only hope for stability. They won't. I need to be stable for myself first." The frustration peeled from Carol's lips, a volatile declaration ignited by years of swallowed sentiments. "This isn't about you or Mom and Dad. It's about me and my art." The pause deepened, and within that moment, Carol could almost hear Ellen's mind racing. It had been all too easy over the years to slip into the role of facilitator, to curb her desires to suit family narratives. Those expectations wore like heavy shackles, and strangely, breaking free felt exhilarating, but terrifying. "You're being selfish. You can't just abandon everything we've built," Ellen countered sharply. As Carol felt her defenses crumble, she considered how Ellen had always seen their lives as tightly interwoven. In that moment, Carol realized that untying those knots would require strength she hadn't fully acknowledged within herself. "Maybe I've been too dependent on the structure we built," Carol replied, her voice steadier now. "Doesn't that deserve a chance to change, to evolve?" With each word, she approached a truth that had remained buried beneath her layers of compliance. Ellen sighed, absorbing the weight of Carol's resolve. "And what if you fail? What if your art doesn't resonate? What then?" The question hit like a gust of cold wind. Carol reflected, wondering if this was what she had feared above all, failure. But what if failure could also lead to transformation? She dug deeper into her memories, from the first time she splashed paint on canvas in childhood to the isolation she had accepted as a safety measure. "What if I need to fail?" Carol's voice wavered, but clarity seeped through the cracks of her doubt. What if failing is part of this growth? A silence hung in the air, each second stretching longer than the last. Carol could feel Ellen's resistance softening slightly, like ice melting under the sun's warmth. "I just don't want to see you hurt," Ellen replied quietly. "I get it, but you can't protect me from this. This is my pain to bear, my joy to discover. I need to find my own balance," Carol asserted, searching for the words to encapsulate the freedom she now craved. "Then you need to follow through." Ellen paused, her voice cautious yet supportive. "But don't expect everyone to understand instantly. Just be prepared for that. Honestly, I welcome it." A surge of conviction coursed through Carol. She had weathered doubt for too long. "I'm not the person I was. I'm choosing to do this for me, and that has to mean something." As the conversation shifted, layers of frustration began peeling away, revealing a deeper connection rather than division. Carol learned what it meant to stand her ground while nurturing the bond she shared with her sister. She could pivot, allow her voice to resonate, while also honoring the authenticity of their relationship. When they finally hung up, Carol felt the rush of adrenaline subsiding, replaced by a tangible sense of relief and determination. Her reflection in the canvas seemed brighter, a kaleidoscope of untold stories yearning to breathe. But even as she began to feel the embers of strength warming her spirit, new questions sparked in her mind, uninvited yet clarifying. Would she face repercussions from her parents? What would it mean when they confronted her choices? And most importantly, how would she weave this raw truth into her art moving forward? As she picked up her brush again, her heart steadying, she knew the next stroke would have to be powerful as the journey she was embarking on. The canvas remained blank, but full of potential. Would this be the moment she fully stepped into her identity, or simply another step further into uncharted territory? With resolve igniting her core, Carol poised to begin anew. Carol studied the blank canvas before her, the stark whiteness mirroring the uncertainty that still lingered after her conversation with Ellen. What colors would she choose? What themes would breathe life into her art? Each brush stroke would be a declaration, an exploration beyond her comfort zone. She felt acutely aware that her choices could provoke reactions from those who viewed her work, ready to pounce on the vulnerabilities she intended to lay bare. As she dipped her brush into vibrant, fiery hues, Carol remembered her childhood, how she'd experimented without fear, painting wide swaths of color on immense canvases. There, in the sanctity of her room, she had been bold and reckless in her pursuit. Where had that girl gone? Somehow life had layered her with doubt and restraint, but now the memory ignited a flicker of rebellion. Pushing past her hesitations, she began to paint, layering color over color, letting the vibrant reds mingle with calming blues. It was a chaotic dance, reflecting the tumult in her heart. The strokes were tangible and real, unlike the abstract anxieties that had haunted her. With every movement, she found herself grappling with thoughts about her family and the expectations uniquely woven into the fabric of her life. Each smear of paint seemed to push back against doubt, as if the colors themselves were whispering reassurances, urging her to release the weight of obligation. The dissonance she felt shifted into resolve. Yet a twinge of guilt crept in, a familiar whisper reminding her of how perfectly her parents had envisioned her life. Could she affirm her growth without shattering their dreams? Perhaps it was a fundamental truth she needed to embrace. Stepping into her authenticity didn't equate to ripping apart relationships. It could mean finding a way to bring her family along with her, if they were willing. A flash of determination surged through her as she realized that art could serve as both her expression and a bridge. As the canvas grew bolder, Carol took a step back, scrutinizing her work. There it was, a person emerging within the chaos. She could see her own strength reflected in the tumultuous strokes, a figure standing defiantly against a backdrop of societal expectations. What if her art could inspire others to embrace their own truths? But doubts fluttered like moths around her resolve. Providing a deeper dive into these conflicts might unearth a fiercer backlash than her parents' confusion. What if they didn't recognize the woman forging her own path? How would she prepare for that confrontation? She wished she could curate their responses like her art, molding the narratives to meet her desires. Just then, a text notification jolted her back to reality. It was from her mother, reading, "We need to talk about your future." The pulse quickened again, anxiety creeping in like an unwelcome visitor. Future, Carol muttered to herself. The word twisted within her, entangled with her need for independence and her fear of disappointing the very individuals who'd raised her. Regaining her composure, she took another deep breath, recognizing the significance of this precipice she stood upon. This was not merely about art. It was about identity, about facing her fears loud and unafraid. She could visualize the confrontation looming ahead, the necessity of fighting to explain her choices and share her journey. If she were to be an artist, her truth had to be for everyone to see. With the brush poised above the canvas, Carol finally dipped it into a brilliant gold, a symbol of the light she sought to share. She began to paint not just for herself, but for all the women who yearned to step into their authenticity without apology. Would her message echo? Could she resonate as a voice of courage rather than compromise? There was a symbiotic relationship developing between her inner self and the work unfolding before her, but it was tenuous. Did she have the emotional fortitude to navigate the inevitable tumult of conversation with her family? The stakes of her revelation hung in the air like the last stroke on a canvas poised to be completed. As the golden paint leapt onto the canvas, illumination brushed up against the edges of her fears. Carol felt it, the moment of truth drawing near. Could she embrace her path fully when she stepped beyond the door into her parents' world? The question hovered like a thread pulled tightly, ready to snap. With one decisive brushstroke, she pressed forward into her artistic voyage, aware that the real canvas of her life awaited her story's unveiling. Carol stood in her studio, the scent of paint thick in the air, each breath laden with the promise and peril of her evolving identity. The canvas before her now brimmed with vibrant energy, yet her heart twisted again as thoughts of the conversation with her mother loomed ever closer. She needed to prepare herself, not just for the words she would share, but for the potential storms that could follow. How had she arrived at this crucial juncture where her passion for art collided so forcefully with family expectations? She sensed that the refusal to conform would rattle foundations once considered solid. This realization struck her deeply. Growth often comes with discomfort, and the only way forward was through the tumult, both in her art and in her life. Deftly mixing colors on her palette, she pondered how to use art as a conduit to her own truth. Could her paintings be a reflection of her journey in such a way that even if misunderstood, they could still spark dialogue? She felt an urge to use her art as a beacon, a message that extended beyond her fears and directly into the lives of those who might feel trapped under the weight of societal norms. As she layered paint over paint, the brush whispered reminders. Impressions from the past began to surface. Fierce debates with friends about authenticity, her own struggles with identity, and countless late-night conversations with Ellen. It was clear her friends had played roles in her awakening, nudging her to challenge the status quo. Yet, was she prepared for the truth that lay ahead? The truth not just of her own identity, but how it would be perceived by those she loved? It felt as if every stroke layered on the canvas became a fragile revelation, a silent challenge to her family to understand her choices. The fear of misunderstanding and rejection coiled tightly around her heart. Drawing a deep breath, Carol stepped back to examine her work again. The swirling golds and passionate reds collided harmoniously, embodying struggles she had faced and ones she would undoubtedly confront again. Those colors weren't just paint, they were her life's experiences, rich in nuance. What if, she thought, I could share this creation with my mother? Could it serve as a conversation starter, a way to invite understanding without needing to defend every choice? She wouldn't merely explain herself. She could reveal herself through her art, embracing the risk of vulnerability. But would her parents see the essence of her journey in those bold strokes? A creeping doubt brushed against her ambition as she churned through the possibilities. The idea of unveiling her truth through a piece of art both exhilarated and terrified her. What if the reality fell short of the ideal she envisioned? The tension spiraled within her as the phone buzzed again, a reminder of her mother's request for a conversation recurrently asserting itself in the back of her mind. She could feel the clock ticking, each second echoing a countdown towards revelation. Suddenly, a rush of clarity enveloped her. She wouldn't just discuss her future, she would share her present, this transformative process that the canvas captured so vividly. Perhaps confronting her fears directly, she could cultivate acceptance instead of resistance. But was she emotionally equipped to view her art through that lens? To sift through the vulnerability and have an honest dialogue? With newfound determination, she took a deep breath and reached for the brush, feeling the weight of the choice solidifying in her grip. This was not merely an artistic endeavor. It was a personal campaign against the self-doubt and expectation that had shadowed her for years. As she continued to manipulate her tools, an exhilarating thought surged through her mind. What if, in sharing her work and revealing her heart, she could empower her mother and herself? a dual act of transformation. With each stroke, the haunting shadows of doubt lessened, replaced by the bright strips of courage beginning to stitch her confidence back together. The most creative interpretations of her own fears were not about perfection, but about authenticity. This narrative arc was about love and acceptance. The next brushstroke would mark a threshold, one poised to bridge the chasm she faced. It was time to uncompromisingly reveal herself through the language of her art, connecting her past to a future she was just beginning to define. Yet, as the hours passed, the looming reality of the conversation stayed like a specter. Would her revelations be met with support or resentment? Would she be able to maintain her newfound resolve when met with the strongest opposition? With a steadying inhale, Carol prepared for yet another stroke. She would not only use her art to express herself, but also to anchor her family in an understanding beyond mere words. She finally let the brush glide forward, knowing that the real test awaited her when she stepped outside the walls of her studio, the moment she would confront perceptions by allowing her art to speak before her. The weight of the impending confrontation weighed heavily on her heart, but in that uncertainty lay the seeds of growth. What awaited her beyond the studio could change everything. The real challenge of her transformative journey would soon begin. Would she embrace it, or would fear weave its way back in? Carol felt the tension thrumming in her chest as she put the paintbrush down, the vibrant reds and golds of her canvas refusing to let her forget the significance of the moment that loomed before her. Each stroke had been fueled by months of introspection, but now, standing in front of her work, she recognized that this was not merely about art anymore. It was a rite of passage. She glanced at her phone again, the blocked screen littered with missed messages from her mother. Every notification felt like a reminder that clarity was still necessary, but clarity came with its own kind of chaos. Taking a steadfast breath, she forced herself to revisit the thoughts that had led her to this moment. The color palette she had chosen was deliberate. The swirls of crimson were not just random choices. They represented passion, frustration, and the burgeoning energy of a life-seeking validation. She could feel them pulsating against her fingertips as if urging her to release the suffocating grip of doubt. What had been merely art was now evolving into a manifesto of her identity. Without an audience, the canvas had become her confidant, absorbing secrets she hesitated to share with the very people she had once relied on for approval. Could art speak louder than words, weaving her truths into a tapestry that would touch her mother's heart? The thought both exhilarated and terrified her. She questioned the ability of paint to convey the emotional nuances of her experiences. How could she encapsulate years of suppressed feelings in mere pigments and strokes? This would be a test not only of her creative capabilities, but of her emotional resilience. Her resolve hardened. At that moment, she realized that she possessed a silent strength forged by years of living under expectations that hadn't bent to her will. The idea of presenting herself authentically, while daunting, was also liberating. Every moment spent creating was a step away from conformity and into a life defined by personal truth, a life echoing the whispers of her heart rather than the demands of others. As she took a few deliberate steps back from the canvas, she positioned herself within that space, the heart of her intention, and let herself imagine the conversation that was about to unfold. Carol envisioned unveiling her creation, revealing not just paint on canvas, but fragments of her soul, all the colors that had shaped her into who she was. In that vivid imagining, she saw the potential for connection, a bridge between her and her mother that could lead to understanding, acceptance, and even healing. Yet a swell of anxiety knocked against her newfound courage. Would her mother see what lay beneath the surface, or would she dissect the art, reducing it to mere brushwork? The fear of being misinterpreted cracked like thunder in the back of her mind, echoing all her insecurities. The comfort of anonymity that her studio provided would soon vanish when she stepped into her mother's world, a realm governed by expectations she had fought against her entire life. With each deepening breath, Carol determined she wouldn't engage defensively. Instead, she would approach this unveiling as an invitation, a pathway to reveal shared human experiences that transcended generational gaps. If her mother engaged with her art thoughtfully, they could cultivate a dialogue that might transform apprehension into empathy. As the sun dipped lower outside, painting the sky with blush and indigo, she became aware of the existential choice that loomed over her. Finally stepping forward into vulnerability could very well unravel unseen bonds and entangle them in a new tapestry of relations. Would this moment spark the change that could redefine their narratives, or would it ignite the tension that kept them both emotionally distant? Resolutely, Carol straightened her shoulders and gathered her thoughts one last time. Turning to her canvas, she picked up her brush and added the last strokes, each one deliberate, reflecting bravery more than mere color. This time, she wasn't just painting her fears. She was creating an opportunity for transformation, for connection, a bridge to allow her voice to be heard. With the final stroke completed, a chill ran through her. She realized that the artwork was ready, but the real preparation was only beginning. Would she have the audacity to step into a conversation that could reshape her world? With that thought, the anticipation stung her senses. The time had come to face not just her mother, but herself in the reflection of her choices. As evening crept upon her studio, gathering shadows and whispering near dreams of potential futures, a stronger conviction pulsed through her veins. The moment of truth was at hand. The canvas wasn't just a reflection, it was an invitation to change the narrative forever. What awaited her at the other side of that threshold could either be a bridge to understanding or a cliff leading to misunderstandings. Time would reveal whether she could forge new connections amidst the storm brewing in her chest. Would the horizon of tomorrow hold acceptance or division? The answer danced just beyond her reach, intensifying the urgency of the moment. As Carol approached the door to her mother's home, she felt the weight of each of her steps, the culmination of months spent finding herself through paint and color, and now the impending confrontation that would reveal her truth. The vibrant warmth of her studio felt worlds away in the stark, traditional environment that she had grown up in. Each inch forward was fraught with an anxiety that both thrilled and terrified her. Could she say all that she needed to say? The familiar scent of home, cooked vegetables and baked goods filled the air as she stepped inside. Yet it felt foreign, a reminder of the expectations that had long been interwoven with her identity. Carol's mother greeted her with a cautious smile, breaking the silence that hung heavy in the air. "I'm glad you came. We really need to talk." "I know," Carol replied, her voice steady despite the storm raging within. "And I brought something to share." Her mother's eyebrows shot up, curiosity intertwining with the undercurrent of concern that colored her expression. The brightly colored canvas had felt like a shield, and now it appeared as the key that would unlock a door they had both hesitated to walk through. Carol pulled the covered piece from her bag, heart racing as she revealed her creation, a riot of reds, golds, and swirling teal. "It's a lot," her mother said cautiously, examining the work before her. "What does it mean?" Taking a deep breath, Carol felt grounded by the invitation for dialogue embedded in her mother's question. "It's about finding myself, my voice, after feeling lost for so many years." As she explained the colors and strokes, she felt the magnificent weight of her art bridging the gap between them. "Each layer signifies a moment of conflict, the struggles I've faced, and ultimately, the joy of reclaiming who I am," she shared, her tone veering towards urgency. "I want you to understand my journey, and that this isn't just art, but a representation of the choices I've made, to create instead of conform." Her mother listened intently, frowning slightly as she searched for the right response. "But Carol, what if this all falls apart? What if pursuing this path doesn't lead to stability?" The concern was palpable, underscoring the generational rift between dreams birthed in conformity versus those forged in authenticity. Carol took another steadying breath, the essence of her journey boiling beneath the surface. Mom, stability doesn't have to mean sacrificing who I am. I want to learn and grow and even fail, not to harm our family's expectations, but to redefine them. Am I not worthy of pursuing my passion just because it looks different? The tension in the room shifted. Carol watched as her mother's brows knitted tighter, struggling with the idea of what was being asked of her. Acknowledgement flickered in her eyes, revealing something deeper, an understanding of the complexities of growth. "What if I don't understand what these choices mean?" her mother finally replied, the words marked with vulnerability. "Then let's explore it together," Carol offered, a surge of hope threading through her resolve. "I need your understanding, not just acceptance." The two stood in that space filled with unspoken possibilities, the light from the window casting softer shadows on their faces as they faced the new, uncharted territory ahead. Carol sensed a hesitance in her mother's stance, but there was something different, an openness lingering in the edges of her expression. "Would you help me understand?" her mother asked slowly, a tentative step towards bridging their differences. "Let's engage with the art," Carol encouraged, her heart racing anew, but now eager to share rather than fearful of rejection. As she stepped closer, she began to share stories behind the colors and strokes, revealing layers of herself that had long gone undiscovered. In that dynamic exchange, intricate tendrils woven from each moment unfolded between them, anchored by the essential humanity Kat had painted on that canvas. The act of unveiling not just her art, but her truth adorned their dialogue with hope, allowing room for her mother to seek understanding rather than defense. The conversation continued to deepen, with each layer uncovered sparking vulnerability and shared fears. Gradually, as they both explored this revelation, Carol recognized the power of authenticity not just within her, but as a light leading them toward a mutual reconstruction of connection. It was no longer solely about her art, it was a commitment to navigating their relationship anew. Hours passed, and as sunlight faded into twilight, they stood together in the studio, surrounded by these vivid declarations of growth and hope. Carol felt a profound sense of accomplishment embedded not just in the sharing of her journey, but in witnessing a new bond forming with her mother, one anchored on honesty, love, and the promise of acceptance. The moment felt monumental, a vital leap forward in reclaiming her identity, a transformation that had traversed beyond mere colors on canvas and into the layers of familial ties. Each word exchanged had fortified her resolve, molded from vulnerability into understanding. As Carol's mother stepped back to observe the canvas once again, something unexpected dawned over her face. Acceptance. "I see you now. This does mean something, doesn't it?" "Yes," Carol breathed, feeling the weight of recognition anchoring her heart. "And it's just the beginning." Their eyes locked. In that moment of connection, Carol knew they had faced the challenge together. The journey of reclaiming her narrative had brought newfound meaning not only to her art, but to the relationship she cherished with her family. Stepping away from the canvas, Carol felt an extraordinary surge of confidence coursing through her veins. She had conquered not only her self-doubt, but also the familial expectations that had long defined her. Here was the realization. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a new dialogue, a narrative woven together by the act of creation and the courage to unveil her truth to those she loved most. The colors on her canvas would ripple into the world, a journey intertwining growth, artistry, and love in multifaceted ways. From this moment onward, Carol would stride forward, confident, fulfilled, and ready to conquer whichever path lay ahead. As she looked around at her studio, visceral and alive with her creation, she realized she had achieved her voice, conquered her fears, and proved that embarking upon one's truth could catalyze transformations unseen. This was her moment, and she would embrace it wholly. Now was the time for reaching out to everyone who might need to hear this story, now was the time to share. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share.